All right, well, it's 6:05. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sam Frank. I'm with Art Street Communications. We are assisting Equinor with all elements of public outreach and engagement for their various offshore wind projects, including Empire Wind and South Brooklyn Marine Terminal and the onshore substation, which are the subjects of tonight's two back-to-back meetings that we will be talking about this evening. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. There's a translation caption button on the bottom of your Zoom screen if you need some translation for this evening. After our presentation tonight, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. So there's a Q&A button also at the bottom of your Zoom screen where you can ask a question and we will answer it if it's relevant to the subject matter tonight. And if it's not fully relevant to the subject matter tonight, we're still very interested in your question and we want to be able to follow up with you about it. So please give us all the questions and information that you are seeking, and we will definitely be able to follow up with you on that point. Also, as a note of fact, we are recording the engagement meeting tonight to be able to share with our community the recording of the meeting. And if I haven't forgotten anything, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Josh Verloon of Equinor. Thank you very much and welcome to the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal SPDE's permit meeting. And SPDE, as an acronym, just so everybody remembers, stands for State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Thank you very much, and over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Josh Verloon. I'm Director of Permitting for Empire Wind, so that covers permitting for our Empire project, both in Brooklyn as well as in our offshore lease area out in federal waters. Covers federal permitting, state permitting, and local permitting. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview about Equinor as well as the project before turning it over to Terry Garish from Jacobs, who will give more of the technical presentation on what we're here to discuss this evening. Holly, next slide, please. So I will start with a little bit about Equinor and who we are, developing the Empire Wind project, Empire Wind 1 specifically. So Equinor is an international broad energy company based in Norway. Equinor has been in the US since the 1980s. There are more than 22,000 employees, and the company has a presence in 30 countries. There are projects across the world and expertise in global logistics with a real specialty in offshore and deep water projects. In addition to Empire Wind 1, we have Empire Wind 2 project, the Beacon project, that are all giving power to New York, as well as a lease area off of California, as well as international offshore wind projects. There are 50 years for Equinor in offshore wind, in offshore experience, as well as 10 years in offshore wind. Holly, next slide. So to give a bit of an overview about Empire Wind, obviously what we're talking about tonight is for the permit related to dewatering at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal and Sunset Park. The project actually encompasses the federal lease area where there will be wind turbine generators, or WTGs, that will be installed in the federal lease area. All of the power from those wind turbines go through a series of inter-array cables, sort of collecting all of that power up to an offshore substation. From there, there are export cables that will be buried in the seabed, both in federal waters as well as when we enter New York State waters, which is about 3 miles out from shore. That will go through to the onshore substation, which will be located at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, directly adjacent to the port facilities that we're talking about in our first meeting. There will be an operations and maintenance base, as well as a home port for operations and maintenance vessels that will service the wind port that will be located at SBMT. And from the onshore substation, We have interconnection cables that go up to the point of interconnection with the overall transmission system in New York City. That is at Con Edison's Gowanus substation, which is about 0.2 miles, I believe, up 2nd Avenue from where South Brooklyn Marine Terminal is located. Holly, next slide. Here we go. All right, so this gives an overview of the upgrades that are for the port at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. This SPDE's permit that Sam mentioned is for dewatering that will be related to the construction at the port facility. As I was just discussing, there's sort of a portion on the kind of left-hand bottom of the screen that says onshore substation. That is the subject of the meeting later this evening. This permit is focused on the port upgrade, which includes this whole green shaded area. This is where all of the components for the wind farm will be staged and prepared for going out to our federal lease area for installation. And so this green shaded area is where those port upgrades will take place to support both Equinor's wind farms as well as to be a world-class wind port for the offshore wind industry at large. Holly, next slide. So that first with shaded area is sort of an overlay of what it looks like today. This current screen actually shows a rendering of what the project will look like once completed. You can see the port facility with all of the various turbine components staged, as well as the cranes and other equipment that will be used for load out, and a wharf where the vessel the service and operation vessel would be docked, and then you can see kind of at the middle of your screen a rendering of the operation and maintenance space and the substation to the right. Holly, next slide. And that is the end of this sort of overview of the project. I will turn it over to Terry Garish with Jacobs. Excuse us, we may be having some technical difficulties.
Terry, are you able to, can you see the presentation? It seems like she might not be seeing it. And also, Terry, I think you're muted. You might want to hit escape and you will be able to see your screen and you can unmute yourself. No, we can't hear you, Terry. That's unfortunate. Why don't we, if you could, Holly, maybe continue advancing the slides and we can continue on.
Sure. I'm Holly Welsh. I'm with Equinor, and if Terry is able to work through her technical difficulties, she will join us. But the purpose of today's meeting is to let you know about our State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or our SPDE's permit. The SPDE's permit is used for construction dewatering. it is made up of several components. The Long Island well permit, which has to do with dewatering from several well points. The water withdrawal permit, which has to do with water withdrawal or dewatering from excavations, and the discharge permit. We are for this project, we are the water is coming from the Gowanus Bay. The piers extend out over the bay. When we dig and when we are updating and refurbishing the piers, there will be some water that we need to pump out of the excavation areas in order to be able to safely and efficiently access utilities and to do our construction work. So that's what is causing the need for this SPDE permit. I'm just going to give a little overview on the construction dewatering. This slide is showing a map. The area that is outlined in red, that is the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. That is the focus of our discussion today, and that is where we will be using it as a staging port for the parts for the wind turbines that will be installed off of New York, off the New York coast in federal waters.
We can hear you great, Holly, by the way. Thank you for picking up.
No problem. Just going through a few key points on that. Upper New York Bay, that is the water that is right off of the piers from the previous slide with the red outline. We will be doing construction because of the size of this site. There will be several excavation areas open at the same time. We will be pumping large quantities of groundwater. It's basically water, more or less, it's brackish water. But none of the water that is pumped out of our excavations or the well points will be discharged to the sanitary sewer system. It's all going to sewer outfalls. At a peak, which is when we are working on the 39th Street Pier, the peak amount of water that's being pumped is a little over 8,000 gallons per minute of water. But after we have the major repairs done to the 39th Street Pier, which will be the two largest excavations on this project, the remaining excavations for the remainder of the construction will be much smaller, and they will have a much lower pump rate. And those smaller excavations, we anticipate having a peak pump rate of approximately 2,900 gallons per minute of water. This property is located within the brownfields. We are participants in the brownfields cleanup program. And so as a result of that, any volatile organic compounds or semi-volatile organic compounds, PCBs, or any total or dissolved metals that are in the water that is being pumped, will be treating the water to make sure that that water meets surface water quality standards prior to being discharged. All of the water that is extracted or pumped is going to be treated. We will go through the treatment of that water in just a moment. And all of the discharges will be for the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. All of the discharges will be their private outfalls or private discharges, storm sewers essentially, that discharge the water back into Upper New York Bay. So essentially the water fills in underneath the pier. We pump it out as we're excavating in the kind of wet soils that are under the pier, and then that water gets treated and pumped back into the bay. See if I can advance the slide. Look at that. All right, this shows just a little bit better drawing so that you can kind of see it zoomed in. The buildings that you see here and that are labeled on this slide, those buildings exist today. This is what the pier area looks like today. You will notice that our neighbor off on the right-hand side of the screen, that Sims recycling facility, that's a recycling facility for the large part of Brooklyn. That is not part of our facility. They are just our neighbors. We are the rest of the area that is fairly colorful on this slide. And the reason we are in the Brownfields program, as you can see, there are several older buildings on this property. This has been used as an industrial site for decades. prior
Excuse,
to.
excuse me, Holly, it's Terry. If you can hear me now, I don't know if you
Yes.
can, I rebooted.
Great. I'm
We
going to
can
let
hear
you
you
take
much
over.
better
then.
now, Terry.
Fantastic. I'm going to let you take over.
Okay. So go ahead on the next slide. You just described this one, right? This is existing conditions. There are several buildings that exist that are going to be demolished, but you can see how it's an industrial site, pretty much flat, pretty much vacant, except for some of these buildings, and there's a rail line that goes through. So this is the existing conditions. Okay, next slide. I'm not seeing the next slide, but are you folks seeing the next slide? Because I could do them side by side here.
Yep, that's all right. I'll keep going. It's the next slide. This slide is just showing the areas where we are showing the
I'm
brightest
sorry,
green.
Holly, I have it now, and I can
Okay.
do it on the side. So this shows the areas where dewatering is going to occur and then where discharges are going to occur. So you see the green areas up there are somewhat deep areas. They're for tie rods, and you can see how that's all out on the pier. So it's all right next to the bay. The yellow areas are the crane pad areas. Those excavations are going deeper. They're going to be pilings, and they're a lot more support structure for the crane pads for these heavy cranes. So once again, you can see how that's all right out on the bay, and the dewatering that occurs is basically, it's only necessary to do the construction, and it's basically pulling water in from the bay, and then we're going to put it back out to the bay. So the little green circles that you see around the outside are various outfalls that exist with the existing stormwater sewer system. So there are no city sewers that are involved here. It's all private outfalls for stormwater, and the water that gets pulled up through the excavations and through well points will then be put into existing pipes or into existing outfalls. The next slide shows the schedule, and the idea here is just to let you know that it goes on for more than a year, that some of the dewatering will occur simultaneous with dewatering at other places, but some of it will be staggered. So the site will be redeveloped, right? There are utilities throughout the site that will, some of which will be demolished, and new utilities that will be put in. And then there's the areas that I mentioned, which are the areas where most of the water pumping is going to come from out on the pier there. So the schedule includes working at different areas on the site at different points of time, but also some simultaneous work together. So if you see some of the brighter green, some of the little brighter green areas that with the labels that say possible dewatering treatment equipment location, that's trying to show that at one point in time, there may be more than one treatment system operating. It's expected that there will be several operating because of how the construction schedule is likely to occur. Okay, next slide, Holly. Are you on the construction slide? It's showing me the
It's permitting summary.
schematic slide. What slide are you on?
Permitting summary.
Permitting summary. Okay. So the three permits that are triggered by this temporary construction dewatering are the Long Island well permit when there are well points being used, the water withdrawal permit, which is for over 100,000 gallons per day of water being taken out of the ground, although this is really coming from the bay, and the SPDE's industrial discharge permit is to then put all that water back into the bay, as I mentioned, through the various outfalls. Okay, next slide. So to get into some more specifics on each of these, the Long Island well permit is called the 602 permit because that's the regulation under which it occurs. Even though this project is in Brooklyn and the title of that is Long Island well, it is applicable in Brooklyn. So don't get confused by that. And some of the details now, Holly, if you can go to the slide that has all the bullets for the Long Island well permit.
Yep, you're up.
So these extraction points do not yet exist. That's why we're requesting a permit for them. There will be up to 1,100 of them possibly at different points in time, so not all operating at the same time, but many of them all over the site is one of the most efficient ways to dewater the site. There might be up to about 150 in any one area, or maybe 200 shallow ones. As I mentioned, there are utilities all over the site. Some of them are getting demolished, some of them are getting rebuilt. So those are shallow and just require a little bit of dewatering. That might be by well points, or the next permit that we'll talk about in a little bit, they might be by sumps. The radius of influence is anticipated to be about 450 feet from the excavations. Not necessarily a lot of drawdown, but some drawdown. So the edge of the radius of influence means there's no groundwater drawdown there. And again, most of this is water coming from the bay and just coming through the groundwater. And the way a well point is constructed, it's usually a 2-inch diameter PVC screened pipe, and then it has a sand pack around it, so it's not pulling in native soils. The well permit also requires compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So seeker is being met through the environmental impact statement that was done. SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, has already given their concurrence on this project. So there are no adverse effects that will occur from this project. And there is a lot of data. There's a lot of geotechnical data, and their data, as Holly mentioned, the brownfields reports before, the data from the brownfields reports. And then there's also a joint permit application that DEC and the Army Corps have together. And that application has been submitted for this project as well. And there's a technical dewatering plan that is provided that's part of this presentation and part of these applications. And that will be attached to the joint permit application. So the next slide, if you're showing the one that says dewatering and discharge locations on the south side of the pier, that is trying to show you that the little yellow squares along there, I'm just going to move this over. The little yellow squares show the well points pumps. So all the well points get connected together and then they get pumped somewhere, or it's coming from sumps also. That's the green squares or sumps. So the sumps are going to supplement the well points. And this is just showing an example for this part of the pier, that system, and then out to some of the outfalls. Excuse me, somebody's talking. No.
Nope, you should be clear.
No, Terry, go ahead. The recording stopped for a second, but now it started again.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay. The 601 water withdrawal permit. Holly, can you go to that slide, please?
Yep.
And then the next slide after that.
Sure. Okay. Water withdrawal permit.
Sorry about these problems. Same thing with the 601 in that the well points don't yet exist. The excavations don't yet exist either. They will occur as the construction proceeds. And that's what I mentioned, the sump pump before. So a lot of these shallow excavations that are down by 2nd Ave and closer to where the other buildings and activities are, those are mostly going to be shallow and using sumps. And there are about 17 areas of larger excavation, depths to about 20 feet below grade, that will also have either sumps or well points. So the one permit is for well points above 45 gallons per minute, a certain amount of flow, which we anticipate having. This permit is for water withdrawal, which is for 100,000 gallons per day withdrawal from the ground. And we anticipate that will be triggered. So that permit our application was also submitted. So the next slide, the SPDE's industrial discharge for temporary dewatering. The SPDE's industrial discharge permit applies to different types of activities. And in this case, we're only asking for it for the temporary dewatering. So there's no dewatering that's anticipated to be done by the facility once it is constructed. All of the dewatering that we're talking about is related to construction. And as I mentioned before, after the water gets pumped out of the ground, it'll be treated, excuse me, and then it'll go back through existing private outfalls. Excuse me. Didn't have enough water. The treatment train is expected to be about 500 gallons per minute. And as I mentioned before, or maybe Holly mentioned, that it would likely be treated for solids. Some of the metals that are in the groundwater would be captured when the solids are captured, because metals typically are in the particulate form. But there is one well that had some mercury that was dissolved. So it's possible that the DEC will want treatment for that dissolved mercury. So there are treatment trains for mechanical, for the solids, and there may be additional treatment at some areas or at all areas as appropriate. Again, it all goes back to the bay. The groundwater is quite clean there, actually. Most of it meets the standards that it needs to meet to be in the bay. So it's really quite clean. We're pulling it in, putting it back out. So the application also includes a public participation plan, which you can see when you view the application if you care to, and a supplemental air quality and climate change analysis. And those have been done for the project. Okay, Holly, next slide. I think that's it, actually.
Okay,
I'm
wonderful.
sorry for the difficulties, and for hopefully you can hear me and I'm not in a time delay.
Yep,
But
okay.
if you have questions, we'll be taking questions in the chat.
Correct. We will be taking questions in the chat. I just want to remind everyone thank you all for joining us today, that if you think of a question later or do not want to enter your question in the chat, we can always be reached at empirewind@equinor.com, or you can go to our website at empirewind.com, which has additional information about the project as a whole and Equinor as well. In addition to that, the documents that we are referring to, the SPDE document, is on public view at the Sunset Park branch of the Brooklyn Library, that brand new library branch. I live in Brooklyn as well. How nice to have a brand new library. I see I'm going to the questions now. The first question we have is, will the recording and transcript be made publicly available, and where will it be available? The recording will be available. I believe it will be at our empirewind.com site. We typically put links there to our meetings. Are there additional questions?
We should just also mention that if you have questions, put them in the Q&A feature here and not the chat, as Cindy just did.
Yes, thank you, Cindy Zip. That was great. I don't want to open it on my end because it'll pop up. It'll block what's up there right now. Can you open up the chat and just make sure that there are not any additional questions?
We're looking at the chat and we're looking at Q&A, and that's
Fantastic.
the only one so far, but we're
Okay.
happy to give it a few minutes and see if other folks have anything else to ask.
Yep, it is. I'm gonna leave this open in case there are any additional questions.
Thank you, Terry, also for forging through those little technical difficulties. That was very heroic, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always good to have a backup plan, right?
Exactly. Quick on your feet.
Well, we gotta deal with our tech issues when they come up.
Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we should leave the meeting open. The meeting's scheduled end time is 7:15. I will stay here and leave this open in case there are any additional questions come in.
Well, as we are waiting for any final questions or comments from our crowd here. Oh, here we go.
Okay,
Go ahead, Holly.
sure. The question is it says, can you describe what the onshore substation does? Does it include a cooling system? Josh Verloon, did you want to answer that? Are you still with us? If not, I can take it.
I am still with you. And just to recognize that this particular public meeting is focused on SBMT, but I'm very happy to answer a question about the substation. So the substation does not include a cooling system insofar as like withdrawing water from the bay or from potable water to cool the equipment. I believe it is a gas insulated air cooled system.
And it's a good opportunity to also say, Josh, that we have a onshore substation dedicated meeting set up for 7:30 tonight. So let's let the folks know that now in case they hadn't seen the advertisement before.
And sorry, I noticed that the full question was describe what the onshore substation does. Basically, it takes the power that has come from the offshore substation that has been collected from the wind farm. It steps it up in voltage from 230 kilovolts to 345, which is the voltage that it interconnects at Con Edison's system, and also plays some grid sort of stability and voltage regulation functions, and then it sort of sends the power on its way to the point of interconnection at the Gowanus substation, which is owned and operated by Con Edison.
Question, you mentioned possible mercury contamination. Can you clarify? There is the project as a whole is part of, we are part of a voluntary cleanup program that is the Brownfields Cleanup Program, or the BCP. There was a lot of industrial usage of this site. We have taken as part of our due diligence work and part of our environmental impact statement, and for the brownfields work, we took some soil and groundwater samples throughout the property just to determine the status of the land, the soils, and the water. There is one small area on the property where we have a very small amount of mercury. It is actually below the drinking water standard, but because we are the water is being discharged back into the bay, we are going to remove that material from the water.
And Holly, just so folks know, it's like nanograms per liter, so it's extremely low concentrations. And the bay sediment has high concentrations of mercury also. So we don't know for sure if the mercury that was found in the groundwater on the site just barely exceeds the surface water quality standard. We don't know for sure if that's because of site activities or if that's because of water that's in the bay anyway, because this location is right near where Pier 35 and Pier 39 touch the bay. But the intent is to not put anything back into the bay that exceeds the surface water quality standard of the bay.
Great questions so far, and we're very happy to stay for a while to make sure that other folks who have questions have the opportunity to get them answered.
There's another question. The question is, it says, thank you for the clarification of the onshore substation. Does the offshore substation require a cooling system? And if so, what type of system? Josh, I
can take that.
Yep.
So a great question. Empire Wind uses an HVAC transmission system. Our offshore substation does not require a cooling system.
Okay, are there any additional questions? The current time, why don't we give it, we'll give it 5 more minutes or so. In case there are any other late arrivals or any additional questions. And then just a reminder, there is another meeting that will be happening this evening at 7:30 p.m., another Zoom meeting. It is regarding the onshore substation, and so we'll have more details regarding the onshore substation at that meeting. And it is also about a similar type of permit of the similar discharge, construction discharge, construction dewatering and discharge permits.
Thank you, Holly. And also to remind folks on the call, Ashley very kindly provided the link to the fact sheets, which are translated into Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Mandarin, and traditional Chinese in the Linktree link right there. So in case folks wanted to see those fact sheets translated, they're right there for your availability. Well, there's one more in there, Holly, if you wanted to read it.
I'm sorry,
out.
it's down at the bottom, yes. You mentioned private stormwater systems. Is there no connection of the combined sewers in the area? Will there be any filtration required? Will any litter sediment control be needed and then included? Those are excellent questions. The private stormwater system is, the stormwater system that it starts elsewhere in Sunset Park, crosses our the stormwater on the property, the system is connected within the property boundaries and it discharges to the bay. For this, the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal portion of the project, we will not be using any of the combined sewers in the area. They will all be private outfalls. As far as will there be any filtration requirement, when we treat the water, we will be doing a mechanical filtration. So yes, we will be filtering the water to keep the turbidity levels down and to remove fine particulate matter from the water. And so that you'd asked if there is any litter or sediment control, and so yes, the groundwater treatment system, it will be filtered prior to being discharged.
You're welcome.
These are great questions. Very on topic.
I'm going to, I see it's just a couple minutes before 1/4 of. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your time. I'd like to thank the speakers, Josh Verloon and Terry Garish. And just a reminder, we will be reconvening at 7:30 p.m. on a Zoom meeting to go over the SPDE's permit, the dewatering permit for the onshore substation. Thank you, and we will.
Holly, there's one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was
There-
when will the link to the recording be available?
Hi,
I can take that one. We will
you.
get that out as soon as possible. I know that sometimes Zoom has to download these things, and we'll get it out as soon as we can. We will also be, as Holly mentioned, we will add it to our project website, and we will also be sending it out in the next edition of the Empire Energizer. So Cindy, we will make sure that that comes to you as soon as we have it.
Thank you. I'm just going to scroll down one last time and make sure the questions aren't automatically scrolling up, just to make sure I'm not missing any. I think that was everything. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And we will reconvene at 7:30.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.